I want to start this review by making it abundantly clear that this is a review of a fairly early beta version. Reviewing a beta is frankly ill-advised as development is ongoing and basically everything is subject to change. With that being said, the game is both buyable now and supremely playable in its current state, which I think makes it worthy of review, so here it is. If I were to ask you to name two of the best games ever made, I'm sure you would immediately say XCOM Enemy Unknown and Rainbow Six Rogue Spear, right? Right. Well, imagine if those two masterpieces were combined into one glorious tactical, turn-based orgasm of a game. That game is Frozen Synapse. The basic idea will be pretty familiar to everyone, an arena filled with cover and two teams that want to kill each other. You issue orders like movement waypoints and aiming directions and hit the end turn button once you've made your move. It's pretty much turn-based tactics business as usual, until you come to the twist, and it's a good one. It's so good, in fact, that it completely turns the genre on its head, making turn-based tactics sexy and exciting again. Well, let's be honest, it was never sexy or exciting, but it is now. That twist is that you each take your turn at the same time. Once you've both set up your moves, with each player only seeing their own moves at this point, you each click the end turn button, and it then plays out both turns together at the same time. It may seem like a very subtle change, but it changes everything. You're no longer responding simply to what your enemy has just done, as in a traditional turn-based game. You're now responding to what you predict your enemy is about to do before he does it. It's real-time combat through a turn-based filter, and it's amazing. So, as an example of how this affects gameplay, in an old-timey turn-based game, if my enemy has a guy standing out in the open and I'm behind some cover, I can know for a certain fact that once I make a move out there to attack him, he's still going to be standing there because he hasn't had the opportunity to move because it's not his turn. He has to wait for me to make my move before he can respond to it. In Frozen Synapse, as we both move at the same time, while I'm moving out of cover to attack, he may well be moving back behind cover, leaving me exposed. Or he might have his gun trained on my position and he'll kill my guy as soon as he steps into view. That's probably the single simplest possible example, but it makes the difference quite clear, and best of all, the game doesn't have to sacrifice a single inch of depth in the process. In fact, it probably makes for an even more intricate experience than that found in a traditional old-timey turn-based tactics game. As intricate as it is, though, issuing orders is extremely simple and intuitive thanks to a fantastic UI. You can select your men with a mouse click, issue waypoint orders by double-clicking, and then these waypoints can be easily dragged around. A right mouse button menu has a list of simple orders like duck and stand, cancel aim, and do or don't engage enemies on sight. Each waypoint also has a little time delay slider associated with it, so you can also stack up multiple moves at a single waypoint using a time delay. Using a simple click and drag pointer, you can also select which way you want your guy to aim. Aiming increases reaction time, but reduces movement speed, so it's a cool tactical decision. Combining all of these things together, you might find yourself on one side of a wall with two enemies on the other side. You might, all in one turn, order your man to crouch, creep over to the window, aim in their general direction, and then have your guy stand up after a brief time delay, once he's already aiming in the direction of the enemies, and take them both down before they have time to react. It's an elaborate series of orders, but it can be stacked up in about 15 seconds, letting you focus your efforts on your tactics rather than having to wrestle with some ghastly UI. Not only that, it also reduces the time spent sitting around waiting for your opponent to take his turn to a minimum, particularly as you're making your moves while he's making his. That's not to say there aren't sometimes waits. While you may take 20 seconds to take your turn, your opponent may take 2 minutes, but that's just an unavoidable element of turn-based gaming. Taking turns at the same time definitely does reduce the wait, though, and rarely will you be sitting around waiting for something to do. Each order you issue at each waypoint also appears as an icon, and while this does make it easy to see what's happening and where, and you can even click on and delete individual icons to cancel the order rather than going through the menu, things can get cluttered, making it hard to tell what's happening, and some kind of toggle to display or not display the icons would be helpful, but this is a minor inconvenience. There are a couple of game modes, and each comes in both a light and dark variety. In light mode, you can always see your enemies no matter where they are on the screen. In dark mode, you need a clear line of sight on your enemy to see them. Both light and dark each has its own benefits, and it's great to have the choice. Light is a little open to abuse, as a player in a winning position can simply run away from enemies until the turn limit runs out, while on dark, winning a game sometimes seems like luck, as stumbling into enemies is a little random if you have no idea where they are, which leads to a lot of getting shot in the back. The actual game modes themselves ought to be familiar. There's the standard kill everyone mode, a hostage rescue mode, and perhaps the most interesting is an attack versus defense mode. The map for this mode is split into a grid, and at the beginning of each round players bid on who is the attacker and who is the defender by clicking these boxes. Whoever clicks the most boxes is the defender, but then has an obligation to defend these boxes. I could for instance guarantee that I would be the defender by clicking boxes covering half the map, but then I would have to defend half the map from the attackers. The attackers win simply by getting someone into the defender's territory, while the defender wins by killing all the attackers. The larger the territory, the more points there are on offer. It's an extremely interesting game mode, offering a degree of depth beyond the simple attack versus defense game mode, by having players determine the territory they choose to defend. And it's a very solid companion to the standard kill everyone mode, which is what you'll probably be playing most of the time. The hostage mode is interesting to be sure, but it definitely seems to be the least developed part of the multiplayer game at this point. Each game will last anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes, though 4 to 5 minutes is typical. You can set the number of turns per round and also the number of seconds of real time you get per turn. The default is 5 seconds, meaning any actions you queue up in the turn-based mode will only play out for 5 seconds, and anything beyond that will have to wait until the next turn. This can lead to literally nothing happening in a turn, or to things like a rocket hanging in mid-flight. But as the game moves at such a brisk pace, these things aren't as annoying as they may sound. The observant amongst you will have noticed in the upper right it says "Here" next to player names. This is because it's possible to play the game with only one person present at a time. All the games are saved, and you can log in, take your turn, and log out, and then wait for the enemy player to log in and take their turn. So it's sort of like chess by post, and the game will even email you when your foe makes his move. It's a very awesome feature that I especially appreciate, as many of my friends live in different time zones, but that doesn't keep us from playing together. And the multiplayer features don't stop there. Every single game played is saved online in the database, and you can load any and watch it. Sort of like a ghost mechanic from a racing game meets a replay mechanic from an RTS. It's pretty incredible. You could log in right now and watch every game I've ever played, for example. The game also keeps ranks and stats for each player, with things like overall score and points earned today and stuff like that. You can also export the videos to YouTube, which is pretty incredible. These multiplayer features make what is already an eminently playable multiplayer game even more fun and user-friendly. The visuals are crisp and clean, with a cool blueprints meets virtual reality style, which isn't just attractive, it also feels very appropriate. There aren't many sound effects, but what there is fine. My version has no music to speak of, but I think that's just because it's a beta version. Because it is a beta version, there are some obvious absences. There's no single player worth mentioning, but it is the intention of the developers to have a full campaign eventually. From what I've seen of what can be done with Frozen Synapse, a single player campaign is quite an exciting prospect, but the major appeal is definitely multiplayer, and the multiplayer game is pretty magnificent right now. There is a map editor, and while it's extremely flexible, I found it very prone to crashing, but again, beta. Even if it isn't ever fixed, and it's fair to assume it will be, but even if it isn't, the random map generator is just fine. There's been a tragic dearth of cool turn-based games over the last few years, but Frozen Synapse, with its deep and intricate yet fast-paced gameplay, its smooth and easy-to-use UI, and its impressive stable of multiplayer features, is a game any turn-based or tactical combat fan absolutely has to try.